The power of positive thinking. It's a phrase that is ubiquitous and seductive, yet absolutely cliche. In fact, when I said it just then, I felt like a gag forming. But jadedness aside, is there something to it? And actually, in short, the answer is yes, because there have been a number, dozens of studies, in fact, that look at positive psychology techniques and visualization and meditation, and the evidence shows that there is definitely something to it. You can contribute to a sense of overall increased well-being and increased success and health through what could just be called thinking. Exercises that are primarily done with just you and your mind, or maybe a piece of paper. And if you think about it, why wouldn't this be the case? I mean, the brain and the body are essentially in a feedback loop at all times. We're constantly training and restructuring our brain depending on what we're putting in, what we're doing, or what we're not doing. You even see this in social interactions. Like if you hang out with someone enough, you start to talk like them, you start to even think like them. But more practically, every time you acquire a new skill, it's difficult at first, and it gets easier and easier. And this is because your brain and body are both changing. So in a more mundane sense, it becomes obvious, of course, we can change ourselves with just our mind, just using our brain in a directed way. So whether we're working on a habit or we're challenging our brains to become fluent in a new skill, corresponding neural changes must happen to accommodate that new behavior to make it more efficient. And this is what's commonly known as neuroplasticity. As neuroscientist and author Moeb Kastandi defines it, neuroplasticity is the ability of neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. It is when the brain is rewired to function in some way that differs from how it previously functioned. But what about just positive thinking specifically? Can that really change your brain, your mind, and your life for the better in measurable ways? Has science really looked at this? Well, as mentioned, there have been dozens and dozens of studies that have broadly essentially looked at those very questions. For example, in a quantitative review from 2008 in the Psychosomatic Medicine Journal, they took a look at 35 studies on this question, on the relationship between positive psychological states being correlated with better physical health outcomes and even lower death rates in both healthy and diseased populations. Quote, positive psychological well-being was associated with reduced mortality in both the healthy population and the disease population. And important note, they do say that there's signs of bias in this data, but they still go on to say both positive affect, e.g. emotional well-being, positive mood, joy, happiness, vigor, energy, were associated with reduced mortality in healthy population studies. Here's another meta-analysis from 2015 that specifically took a look at the relationship between self-compassion and overall well-being. And here's a great quote that just sums it up in a nutshell. The results clearly highlight the importance of self-compassion for individuals' well-being. So yes, my friend, it does seem that, at least in some sense, the hot girls from Austin in big hats that call themselves life coaches and the wooey podcast hosts were right. There is some power to positive thinking. You can change your life through positive thinking. And on that note, subscribe to my podcast. But I do want to emphasize that this is not just 5D woo peddling, and there are actual techniques and methods we can take a look at that will help you achieve these outcomes, help you feel the difference it can make in your life. And we're going to look at some of those in this video. So how do we go about this? How do we actually train our minds to think differently, to be more positive, to bring more positivity and success into our lives? Well, the first thing I want to emphasize is from everything I've read, and I dove down the rabbit hole of many different studies, many of which hit the cutting room floor, and I'm not going to mention directly in this video, but they're all contributing to this opinion, as well as, of course, my own personal experiences. And the first point I want to make is that it is a practice. It's not just a switch that you flip on, some decision you make. You have to go through the effort of becoming this more positive person, of training your brain, like I was talking about earlier, to be more positive. So a lot of these methods are not going to surprise you. A lot of these studies look at things like mindfulness, learning, the pursuit of meaningful goals, exercise, and all of them, when practiced regularly and purposefully, do have a meaningful, positive effect on our minds and our overall health. But some of that's a bit tangential to the point of this video, because obviously this revolves around positive thinking. How can we change our lives with just positive thinking? Specifically, I'm going to lean on a few positive psychology exercises that come from a recent study. So the study took a look at 3 different techniques, and they really lean on 3 pillars of positive thinking: optimism, gratitude, and self-compassion. So let's start with the optimism exercise. This is called the best possible self exercise. Now, from the get-go, I want to acknowledge that this kind of does sound like a manifestation exercise. This kind of does sound like the power of causative thought, putting these thoughts out into the universe to attract it. Of course, that's not how this study is framing it, but there's some interesting parallels. So anyway, this is actually a well-established positive psychology exercise where you essentially focus in on your goals. You imagine yourself a fixed period of time down the line, let's say 5 years, and you imagine the best possible version of yourself. You imagine meeting all of your goals, who you would be with, how it would feel. So the way you do this is pretty simple. You sit down, you grab a piece of paper, you get into sort of a calm, meditative mindset where you really start imagining these things. And then you would basically meditate on and answer specific questions. Like, for instance, what would my life look like 5 years in the future if everything goes as well as it possibly can? How would I feel? What would I be doing? Who would I be with? What would be the most meaningful aspects of my life in this best case scenario? How can I take steps to bring this best possible self vision into reality? So the idea behind this exercise, of course, is by visualizing it, by emotionally connecting to it, you're going to increase your overall positivity, your overall sense of well-being. You're going to be hopeful about the future, and you're going to make it more tangible too, because you're writing these things down. And when you start to give an exciting future a little sniff like that, turns out it does work according to the study. And in my own experience, you can really feel this exercise shifting your mind and the quality of your thoughts very quickly. I mean, even just take those few examples that I gave earlier. I'll put them up on the screen again. If you just spend a few minutes first calming yourself and then imagining these things, writing them down, answering these questions, I promise you, it's going to shift your mind for the better. The next exercise is the one that taps into gratitude. This technique is called the gratitude letter, and the gratitude letter is basically exactly what it sounds like. You write a grateful letter to someone who has had a positive impact on your life, and then you actually go as far as to deliver this letter to the person and read it out loud to them. And of course, the idea is that by focusing in on your gratitude and really just expressing it so deeply and seeing the impact that it has on that meaningful person to you, this is going to profoundly shift your mind, put you in a profoundly deep state of gratitude. And according to the study, again, this was a statistically significantly reliable way to increase feelings of overall well-being and gratitude. I gotta say though, trying to imagine myself doing this technique is a bit much. I mean, you really have to put yourself out there. You've really got to be kind of on stage and performative to do this. And it's certainly not something that you're going to do on a daily basis. And I'm actually going to go off script here. I was debating whether I wanted to put this in or not, but I think it's so valuable. While we're on the subject of gratitude, something that's been extremely powerful for me, and again, there is a lot of science to back the claim I'm about to make, is actually a fairly ancient one, a meditation technique called metta, or loving kindness meditation. You sit down, you get comfortable, you calm yourself, and you first think of yourself, and you put well wishes upon yourself, saying, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, may you be at peace. And you really try to connect with all of those wishes for yourself. And then you spread that web of loving kindness out. Next, you would go to a loved one. Same thing. May you be at peace. May you be happy. and you just keep spreading the web out until you're wishing loving kindness across the entire world, across all species, across all people. Again, I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds incredibly goopy, but try it for 10 minutes if you've never done it before, and get back to me in the comments and let me know what it did to your mind. All right, back to the study. So the third technique they took a look at hinged on self-compassion. It was a 15-minute self-compassion technique. And this again is a well-known positive psychology technique. So it's a writing exercise where you would think of a time you were disappointed in yourself or you failed. And then you write about it in an empathetic way toward yourself. You try to view it through a compassionate, understanding lens. And the idea is that this removes self-criticism and self-judgment and negative feelings toward the self and replaces them with feelings of understanding and obviously compassion. Now, I couldn't find the exact technique they used, but again, like I said, this is a common positive psychology technique. So these would be some of the example prompts you might get. First, describe the difficult experience or event. Then identify the negative thoughts and feelings that arose as a result of that event. Write about the experience from a compassionate perspective using phrases such as, I understand that this was difficult for me, or I am here for myself during this tough time. And then you reflect on what you learned from the experience and how it's helped you grow as a person. Interestingly though, according to the study, this was not a very effective technique. It really didn't have much of a statistically significant impact on the people who did it. But like I mentioned near the start of the video, self-compassion based techniques have been shown to be effective in a lot of other studies. And I'm not trying to say there's nothing there. I obviously think self-compassion is hugely important. And I think people who struggle with self-criticism a lot, struggle with self-love a lot, would really benefit from techniques like this. So these are the 3 techniques. And if you want to know which ones I think deserve the Michael P. Platinum stamp of approval, I would encourage you to try that best possible self technique and the loving kindness metta meditation technique. I can personally attest to the value of both of those, and obviously, in case you don't respect the transcendent value of the Platinum Michael P. stamp of approval, or whatever I called it, the science backs these methods as well. And the great thing about metta is it really is something you can do every day. It's not difficult to sit down and do a loving kindness meditation 10 or so minutes a day, and it will profoundly change your mind. And remember, like I said at the beginning of this video, this is a practice. Your brain changes over time depending on the stimuli you give it. So if you don't find a way to occupy these positive psychic spaces regularly, your brain will not change and your life will not change. So for that reason, I'm doing something that I've never done before. I've put up a free guide to both of these exercises on my website. The link to that is in the description. It's totally free. All you do is put your email in and it gets sent to you automatically. Again, this is the best possible self technique and an example for a loving kindness meditation script. And all of the science talk aside, I think it is so important to mindfully orient yourself toward the good things in life. For whatever reason, we seem to be built with this negativity bias. I mean, unless you're like, you probably have that one friend who just seems to be annoyingly positive all the time. You know the one I'm talking about. It's like these fucks are just unconscious, enlightened llamas or something. And maybe they are. But unless you're one of those 1% of the population type folks, we've got to do something to get ourselves out of this malaise, to not dwell on the negative social media comment or the negative interaction we had. Because for whatever reason, these things seem to just live rent-free in the front of our mind to a point where we just completely miss the forest for the trees. We don't connect with the beauty. We don't connect with our gratitude and all of the incredible things that the vast majority of us have in our lives. So the only way out of that is to purposefully, mindfully shift toward the positive. This isn't about bypassing. This isn't about ignoring the world while it burns so that we can feel good. This is about developing the kind of mind and outlook that you deserve that's going to make you a better version of yourself, a more potent version of yourself. Because if you don't feel positive, if you don't feel hopeful, if you don't feel grateful, you're not going to be a driven, loving human being. So there are a myriad of reasons to focus on positivity, make a practice of positivity, and I hope this video inspired you to do that a little bit. Again, go grab those free resources on my website. I would deeply appreciate it if you tickled the algorithm with a like and a sub. Let me know if you've tried or are going to try any of the techniques in the comments, or if there are other techniques you wish I would have talked about. Oh, and tag your one annoyingly overly positive friend in the comments too, and be like, this is you he's talking about, you smiley fuck. That's it for this one. Consider joining our community on Patreon. By the way, we've got a bunch of fun phenomena going on there. Love all of you Wonder Dippers who are already supporting us via Patreon, and I love you all in general.